Snapchat getting new funding from Kleiner Perkins, that according to the Wall Street Journal, that would value it at close to $10 billion. That puts them in a class with names like Uber and Airbnb. Max Wolf, chief economist at Manhattan Venture Partners, says valuations like these aren't quite what they appear. So let's talk about that. First of all, nice to have you. So what, in theory, makes this company worth $10 billion?
So thanks so much for having me. Basically, with all these names, with Uber, with Snapchat, with Airbnb, you're really buying an exciting possibility about the future, and you're buying a very special class of private preferred shares that come with all kinds of stipulations, bells, whistles, possible dividends that the average person out there doesn't get when they buy a common share. So you're not buying common shares, and the valuation is not exactly as it appears. What you are doing is speculating on some of the smartest guys out there building different futures and disrupting some very basic things we do every day, like communicate with each other, Snapchat, like move around in a car service, which would be the Uber story, or disintermediate the hotel space, which is the Airbnb story.
And to be clear, they're investing as much as $20 million. So there's no billion-dollar investment going on here.
Well, some of these companies have taken in at or over $1 billion of the three we're discussing here, but we're looking at tens of millions of dollars for a little piece of a company which keeps growing quickly, keeps needing to raise money, because in most of these cases, getting people excited, changing the way human beings behave, getting tens or hundreds or in some cases billions of users is the initial focus. Only later do we see various increasingly successful experimentations with how to turn traffic into dollars.
So how rational are these valuations, especially when you talk about the actual business model here?
So there's a bunch of ways to value these companies, and they should be done with caution, because a lot of the information that a smart valuation requires doesn't really get publicly disclosed. That's part of what we do at Manhattan Venture Partners for the people who work with us, right? So it's a specialized skill, and you need to be in the space. All that notwithstanding, the truth here is that if you believe that these companies can continue to stay with their users, keep them excited, keep them online, keep growing the users the way they have, these are great growth stories, and they can figure out really efficient ways to turn users into dollars, then these won't look bad in the future, these valuations, but you're buying tomorrow's valuation today, and that's always a high-risk move and should not be done without sufficient information.
Now, in terms of today, the Wall Street Journal reporting that they have 100 million monthly active users. Where does that put them in the pecking order, especially with others kind of chat apps like WhatsApp and all that?
Sure. Well, Snapchat was an innovator in a particular space, right? And it's not just the users they have, although they do have an enormous number of users. They're good internationally, and they have a ton of users who are very desirable to advertisers and to everybody online. That's teens who are very, very active. What they basically allow you to do is send a message that you don't necessarily want to live forever. One of the drawbacks of the internet is people tend to do things impulsively and share bits of their personal lives or photographs that they sometimes regret, including some of the management at Snapchat, which has a very personal experience with putting things out into cyberspace that didn't go away as quickly as they would have hoped. And so what this does is you can have a private communication that evaporates fairly quickly, and so it allows you to be your true self without wondering what it looks like 8 forwards from now when someone you never intended to see it sees it, or what it looks like 8 years from now when you're kind of embarrassed and definitely a different person.
And you mentioned this is really appeals to teens. What's the profit model here, especially when it is such a difficult market? The teens can be so fickle.
Teens are pretty fickle, but they did sort of wholesale move away from some of the older technologies. They're fast and early adopters, and every product category in the world wants to show them ads. So sending different kinds of messages, charging a premium for those, what's usually called a freemium model in this space, and advertising. And there's been a lot of discussion and some experimentation with tying Snapchat into other utilities, distributing other kinds of content on there, as well as monetizing all that engagement with some kind of advertising. Because remember, the 100 million active users understates the value proposition, because some of these people are on Snapchat literally hundreds of times a day.
Wow. So let's talk about the end game here. Now, WhatsApp was bought for, I think, $19 billion. Mm-hmm. What kind of price tag? Do you think this is going to be an acquisition, or is this an IPO?
So WhatsApp was a bit of a defensive play by Facebook that could use a very valuable shares of its own as currency, and really wanted to make sure no one else ended up with WhatsApp. And also, we're seeing the instant messaging category very, very hot now, particularly with teens. The advertisers love it, and you never want to get left behind in this business, so you have to buy the next hot thing unless you're lucky enough to be the next hot thing. So that does puff the valuations quite a bit. Again, the real story of the valuations and the headlines, often they're not all that similar. That being said, once you get into this sort of near or run range around $10 billion, you're usually an IPO story, not an M&A story, only because there are only so many companies big enough or crazy enough to spend $10 billion for an unproven technology.
But then again, they have spent for WhatsApp.
Yeah, so there's a few companies that'll do it, but not none.
Who could do it?
So you're looking at the Microsofts, much rumored to be looking at Snapchat, by the way. You're looking at Alibabas, you're looking at people like Google, you're looking at folks like Apple. But really, you have to have a huge treasury, you have to have tons of cash, you have to have very valuable shares, and you have to be a little bit desperate to make sure that you get those users and someone else doesn't. And a lot of the purchasing in this kind of space is a bit defensive. You don't want someone else to end up with these folks, so you run in there, knowingly overpay a bit, splash out the big headline, and then see what you can do with all those users.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks to Max Wolf. He is Chief Economist, Manhattan Venture Partners. I'm Bobby Rebell. This is Reuters.
I'm here with Bob McCormick, who's the Chief Policy Officer at